There is a pattern so consistent and so predictable that it should be the first thing anyone tells you before you start a diet. You restrict, you lose weight, you feel good about it for a while, you eventually return to eating like a normal human being because nobody maintains extreme restrictions forever. And then the weight comes back, sometimes slowly, sometimes faster than it left, occasionally with a little extra on top just to really drive the point home. And you're left standing on the scale wondering what is wrong with you, what you did differently this time, why your body cannot just hold on to the progress you worked so hard for. Nothing is wrong with you. The pattern you keep experiencing is not a personal failure, and it is not unique to your body. It is the statistically normal outcome of the approach most people use to lose weight. And it is normal not because people are weak or undisciplined, but because the approach itself creates the exact biological conditions that make regain nearly inevitable once it stops. Understanding what those conditions are is the only way to actually step outside the cycle rather than just trying harder within it. The first thing to understand is what the weight you lost during the diet actually was, because it was almost certainly not purely fat, and the composition of what you lost determines everything about what happens when the diet ends. Aggressive calorie restriction combined with high cardio volume, which is the standard approach most women use, produces weight loss that is a mixture of fat, water, glycogen, and muscle tissue. The ratio depends on how aggressive the restriction was and how much protein was consumed during the process. But the muscle loss component is almost always larger than people realize, and it is the part that does the lasting damage. Glycogen is the stored form of carbohydrate your body keeps in your muscles and liver as a readily available fuel source. Each gram of glycogen is stored alongside approximately 3 grams of water, which means your glycogen stores represent several pounds of scale weight that has nothing to do with fat. When you reduce carbohydrate intake significantly, which almost every diet does either explicitly or as a consequence of eating less overall, your glycogen stores deplete and the water bound to them releases with them. This produces a rapid initial drop on the scale in the first 1 to 2 weeks of a diet that feels like meaningful progress, but is mostly just your body releasing stored carbohydrate and its associated water. The moment you eat normally again, glycogen gets restored. Water returns with it, and several pounds reappear on the scale within days through a process that has nothing to do with fat regain, but that feels exactly like it and produces the same emotional response. The muscle loss is where the real problem lives. Every pound of muscle your body breaks down during a diet reduces your resting metabolic rate, meaning your body now burns fewer calories at rest than it did before you started. This happens because muscle tissue is metabolically expensive, and your body in conservation mode treats it as a resource it can sacrifice to reduce its ongoing energy expenditure. A woman who loses 10 pounds through aggressive restriction and heavy cardio might lose 3 to 4 of those pounds as muscle, which sounds manageable until you understand that those 3 to 4 pounds of muscle were burning meaningful calories every single day just by existing. With that muscle gone, her metabolism is now running at a lower baseline than it was before the diet, which means her normal eating, the way she was eating before she started restricting, is now above her body's maintenance requirement. She did not change her normal. Her normal changed relative to her body's new lower metabolic rate. So returning to normal eating after the diet produces fat gain, not because she is eating excessively by any objective measure, but because her metabolism adapted downward during the diet and her previous normal is now a surplus. Metabolic adaptation goes deeper than just muscle loss and is more comprehensive than most people want to hear. During significant calorie restriction, your body makes adjustments across every system it can reach to reduce total energy expenditure. Thyroid hormone production decreases. The unconscious movement you do throughout the day, fidgeting, posture adjustments, small spontaneous activity decreases as your body conserves energy without you being aware of it. Your body becomes more efficient at extracting energy from the food you eat, meaning the same meal produces more usable energy in a post-diet body than it did before the diet. All of these adaptations happen gradually during restriction, and they do not reverse immediately when you start eating more. They reverse slowly over time, and the result is a post-diet metabolism that is meaningfully slower than the pre-diet metabolism even before accounting for the muscle loss. Hunger hormones after a diet are not normal, and they stay dysregulated for longer than anyone in the weight loss industry is motivated to tell you. Research consistently shows that ghrelin, the hormone that signals hunger, remains elevated above pre-diet levels for extended periods after weight loss, in some cases for a year or longer. Leptin, the hormone that signals fullness and helps regulate long-term energy balance, decreases with fat loss and stays suppressed. Your brain's reward response to food becomes heightened during restriction and does not immediately normalize when restriction ends. The practical experience of this is that after finishing a diet, you are biologically hungrier than you were before you started it. Food is more appealing and harder to resist than it was before, and you feel less satisfied after eating than you did before. None of this is psychological weakness. It is a coordinated hormonal response from a body that experienced restriction as a threat and is now doing everything in its biological power to prevent that threat from happening again by driving you to eat more and store more efficiently. Fat cells make this even more frustrating in a way that has nothing to do with willpower or discipline. When you lose fat, your fat cells do not disappear, they shrink. And shrunken fat cells produce less leptin, are more sensitive to insulin-driven fat storage signals, and are biologically primed to refill as quickly as possible. Your body treats depleted fat stores as a problem to be urgently solved rather than a goal to be maintained, and it pursues that solution through appetite signals, hormonal changes, and metabolic adjustments that are all pushing simultaneously in the direction of fat restoration. This biological drive to restore fat stores is persistent, operates largely outside conscious control, and is stronger the more aggressively the fat was lost in the first place. Repeated diet cycles compound all of these effects progressively, and this is the part that explains why women who have been dieting on and off for years find it genuinely harder to lose weight than they did the first time they tried. Each cycle of restriction and regain leaves you with slightly less muscle than before, a slightly slower metabolism, slightly more dysregulated hunger hormones, and a body that is increasingly efficient at storing fat and increasingly resistant to releasing it. The body is not being irrational. It is adapting to a repeated pattern of restriction by becoming better at surviving it, which from its perspective is exactly the right response to the environment it has been living in. From your perspective, it means every subsequent diet cycle is harder than the last and produces less lasting results, which is the experience most women who have been dieting for years describe without understanding why it keeps getting worse. The way out of this cycle is not a better diet. It is not more willpower or more discipline or a stricter approach. It is building the muscle mass that keeps your resting metabolism elevated, eating enough protein consistently to support that muscle, managing your caloric intake over the long term without the extreme swings that trigger metabolic adaptation, and giving your body enough time operating at adequate nutrition that your hormones normalize, your hunger signals recalibrate, and your metabolism recovers the function that repeated restriction suppressed. This process is slower than a diet. It does not produce dramatic scale drops in the first few weeks. It does not photograph well at the 6-week mark, but it produces a body composition that is actually different from where you started, with the metabolic rate and the muscle tissue to maintain that difference without requiring permanent deprivation to sustain it. The weight comes back because the method used to lose it was never designed to address the underlying biology. It was designed to move the scale in the short term, which it does, while simultaneously creating every condition necessary for the weight to return the moment the method stops. That is not an accident. That is a business model, and the first step out of it is understanding clearly enough what is actually happening in your body to stop blaming yourself for a cycle that was built into the approach from the beginning.